Welcome to the Mind Vine podcast, where we challenge the stigma associated with mental illness through conversations about a variety of issues impacting mental health. Here we bring you news, views, and interviews that intrigue, educate, and celebrate recovery. Leading us on this journey are the hosts of the Mind Vine podcast, Daryl Mathers and Chris Bovey.
So welcome to the Mind Vine podcast. My name is Amber Smith. I'm honored to be today's guest host in recognition of International Women's Day. I'm joined today by two inspiring leaders from Ontario Shores. We have Andra Duff-Woskosky and Sanaz Riahi. Andra is our geriatric program director, oversees pharmacy and our recovery, quality, and patient experience department as well. Welcome, Andra.
Thank you.
We also have Sanaz, who is our VP of practice, academics, and our chief nurse executive. Welcome, Sanaz.
Thank you.
I wanted to point out today that we are following precautionary restrictions today. We are safely spaced out. We also are wearing our procedure masks, purple, in honor of International Women's Day. So let's jump right in. Let's start. When I say it is International Women's Day, tell me what that means to you. Sanaz.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for even having me on the podcast. It's really nice to be able to have the opportunity. And, you know, for me, there's a personal meaning. I was born in Iran with two other sisters. And so my parents personally chose to immigrate to Canada knowing they had three girls who were most likely not going to have many opportunities in the country that we were born in, basically by our gender. Mm-hmm. And so we came to Canada, and you know, we've really taken opportunities to do the things that perhaps we wouldn't have had in my country of birth. And so for me, International Women's Day really is a point of reflection of the opportunities I've had growing up in Canada from age of 8, and really getting to the point that I am today, and the educations that have been available to me and the opportunities in the work environment that have been available to me. And I say that also not being naive to the fact that there's still lots of progress that even in Canada we have to make. I mean, I was just brushing up on my statistics on the United Nations around women's progress, and certainly, you know, they state that we're still 130 years away from having gender equality around having heads of government in the world. And so, although we've made lots of progress, I think we still have lots of areas of improvement, but it is that point of reflection of knowing that other areas in the world still there's lots of greater inequalities for women, and that I've really been privileged to be where I am today.
Great. Thank you. I'm enjoying getting to know you better too through this podcast. Andra, what does International Women's Day mean to you?
For me, it's really a call to action for people around the globe to not only remember where we've come from in certain countries as women, but to the gap that still exists around the world for women. And so, you know, Sanaz shared her beautiful story, and I've lived a privileged life growing up being a white woman in Canada. But, you know, within our country, disparity exists for women. And the privileges that we take for granted as Canadian women are just a dream for other women in other countries. So really, it's to have this day and to keep that movement going so that we all have equal rights across the world. Yeah.
Thank you. Andra, it was interesting. You had just said that you recognize how what you have experienced could be just a dream to other people. Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit more about what it means to you both to be a woman in a leadership role at Ontario Shores, which, to your point, could just be a type of dream to someone to have a leadership role at a hospital, a healthcare institution. What does that mean to you, Andra?
It's a privilege to me. Leadership is a privilege, certainly. And leadership comes with its own duties, I feel, and certainly in being authentic and parking my ego and building others up. And I think as a woman leader, we have to do that to other aspiring women and lift each other up. And also lift up those that need to be lifted higher, such as Black, Indigenous, women of color, women with disabilities. It's our duty to do that in leadership role.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sanaz.
I mean, certainly for me, I'm really proud to be a leader, a woman leader in Ontario Shores. And, you know, it's an organization that I'm really proud of because recently I've had experiences of growing my family and have taken a maternity leave. And I think, you know, often women have to feel the need to, prioritize career versus growing their family. And I hadn't had to feel that way in this organization and was able to take my maternity leave being in a senior leadership role without having to feel sense of guilt or sense of holding myself back or the organization back. And I think that that has made me really proud of this organization and the gender equality that we really place on our leaders. So it's been a very positive experience for me here.
Great. Thank you for sharing. Picked up on a couple of things you said there as you reflected upon your leadership roles at Ontario Shores, this concept as leaders, as women, to build one another up, to lift each other up, to lift others up. That idea, Sanaz, I heard you say, of feeling supported to do the things that you want to do as a leader, as a woman, as a mother. So perhaps my next question is this. How can others contribute to that empowerment? How can others contribute more to women's empowerment as we look to help one another? How can we also ask for help? What are some of those things that come to mind? Sanaz, would you like to start?
Sure. You know, I think we're in a world now where there's been lots of dialogue around equality, including gender equality. And I think that we as individuals all have responsibilities and accountability to really to advocate for gender equality and equality all around. And I think that is to not enable myths or taboos around inequalities that exist, specifically around gender, as well as I think it's also important for us to really advocate and contribute to activities and decision makings that really make those changes. And I know, like, for example, we talk about pay equity, or we talk about, more women in influential roles, in decision-making roles. I think that as we start in leadership roles, for example, in our hiring practices, right, making an effort to really to look at the gender of people that we're also taking into consideration and making changes that is significantly needed in our country and around the world.
Thank you. Andra, how do you see others contributing more to women's empowerment?
I was thinking about this, and I too am a mother, so I was having conversations with my son about this, and I think we have to be a role model. We have to raise our children to see others as equals. We have to foster that right from the beginning, and I think a woman should be at every table where decisions are being made. There are more women now in Canada, slightly, than men. I think that equality does take a push. As Sanaz said, I mean, if we just let it go, it's going to be 130 years, which is another 2 lifetimes. I think we have to take a push and start, having women in specific positions in order for that change to happen more rapidly.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I was Also preparing for today, and came across this great quote from Malala Yousafzai. So we know her to be an advocate for women's rights, for equality, for children's rights. She said this, I raise up my voice, not so I can shout, but so that those without a voice can be heard. And so we've been talking a little bit about women's stories that need to be heard and supported more. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, are there stories that come to mind, women's stories that do need to be heard and supported more as we think about how we can start to empower women, so we can start to educate our children on things like equality? Does anything come to mind? Sanaz.
You know, as I was reflecting on this day, I think I was trying to think about all the different women's stories. But in more recent times, I think for me that the stories that are the most important to advocate for are stories of women of indigenous background, Black or colored background, because I think as we all experience, including myself, that there is gender inequality, that we don't always have the easiest path in life just because of our gender. Now layer that with minority groups, and I think that their stories and their day-to-day lives are even more so difficult. I mean, I can just reflect on the day I realized that when I was pregnant with my son, that I was having a son, one of my first thoughts was, I'm so glad, because you're going to have a little bit of an easier life in this day and age. And, you know, it was very sad to have that reflection, but that's the reality. And I think, you know, really highlighting that, you know, as a woman, and, you know, certainly I've had privileges in my life, but I know not every woman does. And those with minority backgrounds really have much more difficult times. And how do we have their stories more prominent in society, where we can really appreciate that not only being a woman, it can be hard in our journeys, but also somewhat of minority. And how do we change that? And how do we change those stories? It's really by understanding those lived experiences more and more on an individual basis.
Thank you. Absolutely. Andra, thoughts on which women's stories need to be heard and supported more?
So I'm loving this because Sanaz and I both prepared our answers individually, but they are so similar in every way, and I just love that. It's amazing. So I agree. We need to give a voice to people who don't have a strong enough voice, 100%. And I also think that it is very humbling to realize in women in North America where they've come from, and that we couldn't vote in the past. You know, there were no women doctors. Now most of my colleagues as doctors are female, and not to forget where we've come from, and never to let that slide, because I think that biases, conscious or unconscious, can slip. And they can force things to slip back. So I think really it's not only about the fight for those who don't have a voice in countries who are developing. It's for us to never take for granted the rights that we have, because nothing says that they're permanent.
Sure. Great. Thank you. This has been a rich discussion. Thank you so much. So we've talked about that idea of equality, not just meaning gender. And I appreciate how you've expanded the conversation today to include some other areas that we need to focus on when it does come to equality. Interesting though, my next question asks about what challenges do women stereotypically face based on their gender? And I'm curious, have you come up against any challenges as a result of your gender? Andra, do you want to start us off here?
Yes. So I was, you know, again, I feel very privileged to have gone to university, to have, achieved a professional healthcare role and then a leadership position. So that part of my life, I feel I've accomplished my dreams in that way. But, challenges I would say that I have gone through have been the internal challenges based on society. So having to look a certain way, having to weigh a certain amount, having to change my appearance in a certain way, and that constant struggle that I faced and that I think other women and young girls still face, that in order for us to be, worthy, we have to look a certain way. So that was absolutely a struggle that I had growing up. And I think that's, prevalent in North America and in developed countries. And that's something that I have gone through. I think, the struggle is certainly different in other countries where, legally husbands can prevent their women, their wives from working, or female genital mutilation still happens in 31 economies around the world, but the struggle is still there for women in various forms.
Yeah. Thank you. Sanaz, challenges do women stereotypically face based on gender? What's your experience?
So I would want to speak a little bit about my most recent experience becoming a mother, and being in a leadership role, in an executive role. I think, interestingly, as I've mentioned before, my heritage is Persian. And so when I speak to family members, as I was going through my pregnancy and my mat leave and speaking to my family members who continue to live in the country, their advice for me of, now you have a child and therefore you must let go of your career a little bit because this is now your focus. And, it's real, that notion of you must pick one or the other, or therefore you're either not a good leader or not a good mother, because you're choosing your career. And that dichotomy was quite real, where I had to really do a lot of reflection, I think, as a new mother over the last year or so. And I think what's been really helpful is returning back to work and finding that, what I say, that beautiful balance where I'm becoming really comfortable in my skin to say, you know what, being a mother makes me a great leader, and being a leader makes me a great mother. And I don't have to pick one, and I'm not falling into the narrative of, if I don't do something a certain way that is society expecting me to be a mother, because I have a wonderful husband who co-parents with me 50%, and it doesn't make me less of a mother or a loving mother.
Right.
And so figuring that out has been a challenge and a struggle over the last year and a half to figure it out, but I'm getting more and more comfortable. But I still face those challenges every day, hearing people's comments or, the size of my family. When am I having a next child? And if I decide that I don't want to have another child, I'm happy where I am, there's a lot of judgment that comes with that, where you feel as a woman, you're not saying the right things. And so we have to change the narrative on women and motherhood and kind of these expectations of you must have a spouse in order to be worthy of, or you must have a big family in order to be worthy of a woman. And I think those are all really false narratives that we build expectations around women. I think it's, you choose what makes you happy and what works for you. But I think those are the struggles that we still live in this society in 2021.
Sure. Thank you both for sharing so candidly and being vulnerable with us today. It's really inspiring. You both kind of touched on this a little bit. I'm curious to know if you have other examples. This concept of women-related myths and taboos. What other ones do you think maybe we could address and need to be broken? Those myths and taboos that need to be broken about women. We've touched a little bit on them. Anything else that comes to mind out of curiosity? Andra?
Yeah, for sure. This notion that somehow a woman's ability to be emotional and to feel is a weakness. As a leader, I think that's probably my top strength, because your whole role as a leader really is to bring people together to achieve great things. And you have to be very, very cognizant of the room and the people you're speaking with, and pick up emotional intelligence. Pick up if someone has said something that's put somebody off in some way, and try and mend that so that together you can collectively move to achieve a goal. So it's not a weakness,
Yes.
it's a strength.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Great example. So now, does anything else come to mind for you?
I mean, certainly, I think Andra and I are very much on the same page. Very much similar. This notion of vulnerability, right? Women who demonstrate vulnerability, especially in leadership roles as well, that is a weakness, and I think that's a big taboo. Because as any of us who are very familiar with the leadership literature know, that really it's those types of emotions and vulnerabilities that really can make significant positive impacts in a leadership role. And I think, to me, that was kind of that forefront of taboos that come to mind as we think about those. But I definitely agree with Andra on that.
It's great. So tell me, where are you currently feeling empowered as a woman in your own lived experience, whether that be in your professional life or your personal life? Where are you really feeling that empowerment lately? Sanaz, yeah. Well.
I mean, I think I just touched on it a little bit earlier on. In my recent experiences, juggling being a new parent and with my career. And I think that's where I'm starting to feel really empowered, is that I don't have to pick one or the other, that I can actually be happy and successful in both without feeling like one prioritizes over another. So I think that, to me, is making me feel a bit more empowered as I find my way and navigate kind of through those struggles, kind of in kind of society's expectations. And I think how I can contribute to this falsehood narrative that I'm in, it's very still raw to me around motherhood and what one should be. It makes me feel empowered to say to people, it's okay that you don't like the first 6 months of your infant. Like, it's hard. You don't have to be all happy and loving about it. You can really be honest about it. And so that's my mission, is to really break those narratives and encourage people to be honest about it.
That's great. Yeah. Thank you. I can also see the way that social media might play into that too, right?
Yes.
We log into social media and what do we see is the bright, shiny, happy families. We don't see those moments where things aren't going well and you're losing your temper and you're losing your patience as a parent.
Exactly.
Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Andra, where are you feeling empowered in your own lived experience as a woman?
So thank you for sharing that, Sanaz. So I feel exactly the same, and after having gone through motherhood, I would tell others the same, because that was never communicated to me. I couldn't wait to come back to work. And I still love my children. But for me, I would say in my leadership journey, so I'm now in the 4th decade of my life, and I as each year passes, I become more empowered to just be authentic and be myself and speak my truth, and be okay with that. And, my leadership journey, it's always been, when you go through school and university and your various degrees, it's always about achieving and what's the next thing. And I know I'm ready for the next challenge. But for me now, in embracing my authenticity, it's really what career speaks to my soul and drives my passion, and that's being authentic, right? So it's not really chasing, a title. It's working in an organization like Ontario Shores, which does meaningful work for people who don't have a voice. And finding, satisfaction and success there. So it's really, I guess, just being authentic and true to myself, loving myself for who I am and, whatever weight I am, and following my true passions in my career.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. One last question for you. How do you feel you can contribute your wisdom, expertise, or ideas to empower other women? And maybe do you feel a sense of responsibility to do so as leaders in the organization? Would welcome your thoughts on that. I'll start with you, Sanaz.
So, I've had the privilege of having an amazing mentor in my life, Barb Milden, who used to be our previous chief nurse here. And so I've learned so much from her, and she has empowered me as a woman, and it taught me the true sense of mentorship. So that's been, for me, one way to empower other women is through mentoring other women who either just want some advice or just understand my journey or share their journeys and help me navigate some of their areas of questions. And so that's been a sense of satisfaction for me to be able to really help mentor other women and empower them. And I think, certainly accolades go to Barb Milden, who has, many of you know her, it just embodies that empowered woman and mentoring others and empowering others and letting them span their wings. And I really am trying to give back the way she gave to me. And so that to me has been the way I'm trying to give back.
Great. Thank you. Andra, how do you feel you could contribute wisdom, expertise, and ideas to empower other women?
So I too thought about my mentors, I've been really lucky to have really strong women in my family who have been mentors to me, and I certainly try to do that in my personal life with new mothers or so my sister-in-law, so helping her through having two young children who need her all the time, and other young women in my family who have great careers ahead of them, and mentoring them to be authentic and true to themselves, like my mother or my aunt would have done to me. But professionally, I've had two really strong, they're both women, mentors in my life. And so one of them is Lorraine Sundstrom-Mann, who's had a very big career in nursing throughout the GTA and in Durham region, who's been my mentor for over a decade now. And really, it's my duty to do that to others now, because I've learned from her kindness. And so I do have several individuals that I meet with, and we just chat about things. And another way to do that, I think, as leaders, and I know Sanaz teaches as well, is to teach at the university and then to invite students to have coffee, virtual coffee now, but to have coffee with you and have conversations, because that can be a huge turning point in someone's life, is just empowering them to think that they could achieve their dreams. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you both so much for your time today, for sharing so authentically, and it's been very inspirational. Good to get to know you better, who you are. And thank you so much for your leadership here at Ontario Shores and the way that you are giving back and mentoring others. And most importantly, thank you for contributing to our conversation on International Women's Day. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.